I'm now privileged to turn to a good colleague and someone that's no stranger to those of you in MU Extension, Rob Russell, who will pick it up from here and really begin to have a conversation with you about next steps as we look forward and what we can do in workforce development. Rob?
Good morning, and thank you, Marshall. I'm Rob Russell, the State Director of Extension's Labor and Workforce Development Program, and I'm here today to introduce our All Things Missouri working session. How do we help Missouri's workforce meet the rapidly changing needs of the 21st century economy? How do we make sure our youth are connecting with effective college and career readiness paths? How do we design pathways to meaningful work and lifelong success for all Missourians, both urban and rural? Our answers and actions will determine our state's future. We are fortunate to have so many government, business, workforce, and education leaders and experts working on pieces of this vital workforce development and college and career puzzle here in the state of Missouri. So where does extension and engagement fit into this mix? Of course, it's where it always does, helping to connect people and partners with needed university-based resources, knowledge, and ingenuity. Throughout the 114 counties of Missouri and the city of St. Louis, we have specialists with expertise in community economic development, labor and workforce development, and 4-H youth development. We want to explore how this network can best support extensive statewide efforts already underway to grow and strengthen Missouri's economy and a workforce ready to take on new skills, demands, and needs. The University of Missouri Center of Applied Research and Engagement Systems, also known as CARES, will guide us through today's session that includes breakout sessions grouped by 10 regions. I now turn it over to Jamie Kleinsorge, Senior Project Coordinator with CARES, to explain more about their workforce development related data visualization and mapping tools and their plans for today's All Things Missouri workforce development sessions.
Great, thank you so much, Rob. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm so excited to be here and be part of the list of speakers today. So there's already been such a great group of folks. And so as Rob said, my name is Jamie Kleinsorge. I'm with CARES, which is the Center for Applied Research and Engagement Systems. Today, I'm going to be taking some time to walk you through some resources that we've put together. And so, as Rob said, this is our take action section, how we think about strategies and what we're going to do next when we get back to our communities. And so I'm just going to take you through a little bit of a presentation today. And before we get started, though, much like we did last year with broadband, we are asking you to take a couple of minutes here at the very beginning to visit this URL. So mizzou.us/workforce. And there's a one question survey there. It's going to ask you one question and then ask for your zip code. And this is exciting because we're going to be able to look at the results of this survey at the end. So I'm going to pause here for just 1 minute and let you guys navigate to that URL. So mizzou.us/workforce. And for those of you who are checking in on the activity feed, maybe you could type that in there for me and make it easier for people to click. And so the exciting part about this survey is really it's just a perception survey. So what do we think are some of the driving factors of workforce development across our state? We're going to look at some data that are going to tell us what some of those driving factors are. And then towards the end, we'll be able to kind of compare, right, our perceptions versus what the data are telling us and what some of our current realities are. So if you have had a chance, thank you so much for completing that survey. Otherwise, I'll give you just one more second to do that. You can do it any time during this presentation here. So, well, jumping right in, I didn't coordinate with our keynote speaker, but I'm very excited for some of the data that he presented to you all because it dovetails quite nicely with the data that I'm going to show to you today. He also had 4 main points that he was going to make, and so we're actually going to be looking at 4 indicators related to workforce development today as well. And he touched on a couple of these, but we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into a few others. So those 4 you'll see here: population change, commuting impacts, workforce training, and skills mismatch. So those are the 4 that we're going to look at. And I just want to preface this that this story map and this set of resources is by no means a comprehensive set of economic development data that's available to you. But there are really four core indicators that we wanted to make sure everybody had access to as a really good place to start conversations within your community. So I'm going to take you through the actual story map right after this part of the presentation. But first, wanted to talk to you a little bit about the indicators before we got into the actual story map itself. So here, this first indicator that we're looking at is population change. And so our keynote talked a little bit about this, right? He's talked about how we've seen declines in population because people are having less children. We've seen declines in our labor force participation because of those population trends, because of age changes and shifts in demographics. And so the first area that we really look at and we dive into in our story map is the notion of population change. And we have two indicators that we see here. So the first one is that percent population change. And we're looking at it over a 5-year period, right? Looking at it over time can tell us a little bit more of the story than just looking at 1 year at a time. We are also looking at labor force participation change. And so that's really that working age population. And so what we're seeing here is we have those areas in pink where we're seeing decreases in labor force participation. We're also seeing some areas in red on that map on the right where we're seeing also decreases in population. And so having both of those present in some counties, maybe just one in some counties, again, that's a conversation starter. Is this something that we should be addressing, and to what extent, right? So using these two maps, there is a gray slider that I'll show you on the story map. You can swipe between the two and get a better idea of that overall population decline, and then if there has been an increase or a decrease in your labor force participation. Moving on to the next indicator, we're going to be looking at commuting impacts. So commuting impacts are broad and they have sort of a variety of ripple effects, right? So I know that I commute, or I did commute to Columbia every day from Holt Summit. So I know I'm one of these lines sort of somewhere here on the map going from Jefferson City to Columbia. I know there's a lot of people that come the inverse way, right? From Columbia to Jefferson City. But what we're seeing here on this map is each of those lines represents about 20 daily average commuters. And so we're starting to see some commuting within counties and within the state of Missouri. Those purple lines are looking at folks who are either coming in from out of state or driving out of state. And we'll take a closer look at that. But the reason that commuting impacts are important, the reason that we wanted to include this as one of our core indicators is because as you can see there on the right hand side of the slide, those are just a handful of the impacts that commuting can have. There are more, but these are the ones that I wanted to focus on here today. So economic growth and stability. There's lots of research out there that you can look at around if people have long commutes, more than 30 minutes, that can really kind of not help with economic growth and stability. Employee health, productivity, and absenteeism sort of all go together, right? We know that folks that have longer commutes, they have higher rates of absenteeism. They're likely to have more health problems like high blood pressure, heart disease, those types of things. So how can we reduce, some of those commuting times? We also know employer attraction and retention. Employers care whether their employees have to commute in every day. Are they going to be calling in for snow days? Are they going to be calling in for other types of reasons? And is it going to make it harder for them to get to work? Finally, family poverty status. We know that it is harder for those folks that have long commutes or sometimes unaffordable commutes, right? It's harder for those families to get out of poverty. So, for those reasons and many more, right, commuting is something that we should really pay attention to. At the bottom of this map, you can see it also as net change. So, we were looking at it as just sort of those daily average commuters across those lines. We can also see it here as net change. And so I've zoomed into Christian County. And I thought Christian County was kind of interesting. Here, we know Christian is really close to Green, where Springfield is, right? And that's probably an economic hub. We know that's an economic hub in Missouri, right? So we have about 28,000 people from Christian County most of them going towards Greene County every single day. And so the question becomes, how do we capture back some of those workers in Christian County, to keep some of those dollars there, to keep some of that progress there, right? We have about 9,000 folks who commute into Christian County, so that's a really good start. So we're able to get those numbers at a county level and start to have conversations about, is this a county level issue or is this a regional level issue? Is this something that we should be working on as a region? So those commuting impacts are also going to be important to having some conversations. The third indicator that we're looking at here is around workforce training and what the landscape of workforce training really looks like. We know that there is, it's really required to have what we consider distributed pathways to workforce development and training. This means we can't just have one actor in the state doing the work. We need many actors providing lots of different opportunities. And that's what we're starting to see here on this map. So the shaded areas in the background are community college service regions. Some of the stars across the map are our chambers of commerce. And then we see diamonds are some of our area career centers. We've added some other assets here, including higher education, workforce development boards, and some apprenticeship programs as well. I'll show you the live version of this in the story map, but this again is going to be a great tool for you to use to say, are there gaps in services? Are there gaps in educational opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities, and support in our area of the state? And how can we work to start to fill some of those gaps? Also, is there saturation? Maybe there's a lot going on, but you're not seeing the results from what's going on. So maybe looking at realigning or reconfiguring some of those programs. So using this asset map can be really helpful for building those networks, looking for partnerships, and just knowing sort of all of the players across the workforce landscape. I'll give a shout out to Rob here. We included a workforce one pager that he wrote. I think it's more like 2 pages, but he does a really good job of showing or talking about each of the players in this workforce landscape. So I would definitely recommend reading that as well. Finally here, the fourth indicator that we decided to look at was skills mismatch. And you may ask yourself, what is skills mismatch? And really it can be explained in 2 ways. One way is looking at it in we have more jobs within a sector than we have workers to fill those jobs. The other way is to look at we have more workers within a sector than we do jobs. And so you'll see that demonstrated here in these 2 maps that I've selected. The first one at the top is the healthcare sector in Missouri. And what you're seeing here is that we have more jobs than workers. There's a lot more healthcare jobs available than we have workers to fill them. And you can see those dark green areas are where the highest prevalence of that is happening. The bottom map, on the other hand, is construction, installation, and repair. There are more workers looking for those types of jobs than there are those types of jobs available in Missouri. So those are just 2 ways to kind of look at skills mismatch. And it's something that we need to be continuing to talk about, especially as our keynote mentioned, right? That, our workforce is changing. Every person is they're getting more valuable in the skills that they have and what they're able to do within the workforce. And so really kind of targeting in on what skills do we have? What jobs do we have? How can we better align these things is going to be really important to moving forward. So now I'm going to walk you through the actual story map. And this demonstration will hopefully get you more comfortable with interacting with this data. And we, as I mentioned, expect you to use this story map as a guide for conversations to refer back to as a reference. It is not necessarily the end all be all of economic development or workforce development data, but really a great starting point for people who are just getting into this work, want to learn more, and want to be data informed with the strategies that they're using. So if you want to follow along and find the story map with me, you can go to allthingsmissouri.org/workforce. The first card that you'll see there on that page is going to be that workforce development story map. If you click on that, it'll land you there on the first part of that page. So I'm going to go there myself. And hopefully you guys will be able to see my screen here. Let me share one more time just to make sure you've got the right view. All right, there we go. So now we're looking at the workforce development story map itself. And what you'll see here is if you haven't had a chance to take that one question survey, you'll see that here. You can click this link and go ahead and take that survey now. We'll look at the results of that here at the very end. So I would encourage you all to take the survey. Otherwise, my results aren't going to be very fun at the end. So clicking into the first tab here around population change, that's what we're going to be looking at first. You'll notice it may take a minute or two for the map to load, and that's completely normal. Just give it a second. And I imagine a lot of us are clicking on it right now. So we'll give it just 1 second to load. Again, we're looking at those population change metrics, right? Labor force participation change and percent change of population over the last 5 years. The exciting thing about this map, as I mentioned, is that there's this nice swipe layer. So I can swipe back and forth between each of the layers to be able to view counties of interest. So for example, here as I'm swiping back and forth, one of the things that I notice is Montgomery County. We see that they've had a decrease in their working force population. And then as I zoom over, they've also had a pretty significant decrease in their population. So that's probably an item, an issue that they're going to want to at least start to talk about, right? Why are those numbers going down and what can we do then to drive them back up? I thought it was very interesting from the keynote presentation. He mentioned that, people are going to be working more remotely, which allows for rural communities like Montgomery County, right, to say, what can we do to start attracting some folks to live here? Broadband probably being one of them, and be able to work here, maybe working remotely. Some more opportunities for that. As I continue to scroll back and forth, I noticed down here as well, here's the county that's showing us that it's red in terms of population decrease. So they've had a pretty significant population decrease in Reynolds County. But when you look at labor force participation change, it looks like it's actually had a pretty significant increase. So the question would be there is what is Reynolds County doing to increase that labor force participation? And what can they do to also increase some of their population? So those are just a couple of examples of ways that you can use this specific map as part of your conversations. Continuing on, that third part of the story map is going to be our commuting map. So those are those nice yellow lines that we see here. And the cool thing about this map is you can zoom in and you can get a little bit more granular and you can start to see sort of, where those employment hotspots are. We probably know them, but this map sort of confirms them and tells us a little bit about where people are headed, right? Where they're going, where they're coming from. So one of the areas that I found most interesting here, probably because of my own personal commute, was between Columbia and Jefferson City. So right now we're looking at numbers for all of the state of Missouri, but we can click into each county. And so I'm going to scroll down here to Cole County for 1 second. And what you'll see is it's going to zoom me in. So I'm going to get a better look at Cole County and sort of see where people are coming from, right? So we have people coming up from the lake, probably down from Columbia. We have people from Jefferson City going up to Columbia. And that's sort of what is represented here. Now, one thing that I want to point out is that we have a nice net change map here at the bottom. And so if you click on that tab, it's going to tell you the actual numbers, which I think is super interesting. Here we can see about 18,000 people commute into Cole County every day. I had no idea the number was that high. When I saw 17,000 for Boone County, I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense. But I was really quite surprised by Cole County. Another very interesting county to look at here, which again, we know some of, right? Jefferson County. We expect a lot of people to be going to St. Louis, to the city, to be working, but the numbers are really quite high. When you look here, we have about 57,000 people leaving Jefferson County every single day. So what is that doing to Jefferson County's economy, their workforce, employer retention, employee retention, those types of things? Those are some of the questions that you can ask there. Our next map is looking at workforce training. So again, this is that landscape map. And the thing that I want to point out here is that we got an updated list from the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. And so we have a very recent list of all the chambers of commerces around the state. And those are noted by these stars. And so I can click on any of the stars and get more information about that chamber of college, or excuse me, that chamber of commerce. I clicked on a college, and that's why I kind of flipped up there. And so you can get additional information about each of these points on the map. So this is, for example, a business council here. So we also have those additional layers over here on the left-hand side. You see we have Missouri Job Centers. We also have these ACT work-ready communities. And so this is something I know that the business and community folks have been talking a lot about, ACT work-ready communities. And so you can see those counties that are participating here on this map. And then we can go back to our regular map here. Finally, the last map that we're going to look at then, or series of maps really, is our skills mismatch. So I showed you two of the sectors, healthcare and construction, maintenance, and repair. But we actually have 9 sectors here. And the important thing to note on these maps is they go from green to gold. And so the green maps are really where you're going to see more jobs than workers. So on my screen right now, you can see healthcare, business and sales, science and technology. We have more jobs than workers in those areas. Then as I continue to click through, you start to see some of that gold showing up. And that's when we're starting to see more workers than jobs. So once we get into transportation, we have an other category, food services, management, construction, and then production. So I would encourage you to click through those and sort of see what sectors are overrepresented or underrepresented in terms of employees across your county and across your region. So the way that we set up this map too is by the MERIC regions, which is a state agency that does a lot of really great economic data. And they're noted here on the left-hand side in the bottom text. So you can get back to these original sources of data very quickly. But they follow those regions, and those will be important as you're thinking about workforce development moving forward. So finally, we have some survey results. So we'll see how many folks were able to follow along and take some of these survey results. And so, we have 150 responses. So that's great. You can see the map across the state of Missouri. I think what's going to be most interesting is this most common answer here at the bottom. And so really what we were trying to do is test your perceptions. What do you think is the biggest factor affecting workforce in your area? And be able to test those against the data that we showed here in this story map. Is it really workforce training? Is it actually commuting? What do you think? And so I'll zoom in here and we'll look at some of these results, but I encourage you to come back, and if you didn't have a chance to take the survey, to take the survey and to look at these results live. So here we can open our legend on the left hand or the right hand side, and we see here we have some areas where we have a tie in green. We have lots of red areas that are showing that we're worried about commuting, which is probably true. We have some skills mismatch in blue. And then we have some training issues in orange and yellow here. So I would encourage you guys to come back and click on your area, see what people think are the driving factors, and then test that against some of the data that we've provided here. So I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint one last time and wrap this up. But really wanted to talk to you all about next steps, because we're going to be headed into some of our breakouts pretty soon. And so here are just some questions to be thinking about. What issues are affecting your county and region, and to what extent? So, right, the indicators that we provided you are pretty foundational indicators. And it's easy to say, yes, we have population change, but to what extent? Is it really bad? Is it following the trends of the other counties in the state and the nation? So how bad is it? To what extent? Or how good is it, right? What are the opportunities if it's headed in the right direction? What does that mean we can do next? What issues do you want to prioritize addressing and why? So, of those four, are there any of them that really stood out to you for your county or for your region? Why did they stand out? Was it something new that you learned or something you hadn't thought about before? Do you feel like one factor is driving another? Those are some questions around prioritization. What assets or partners do you have available in your county or region? The next sessions, we're going to be hopefully learning about some of the assets and partners that we have, but also using that story map. And there are some gaps across the state. So, where are those gaps and how do we start to fill them? How do we look at new creative ways, especially given COVID, to fill those? What additional data or information do you need to begin? Again, this isn't the end all be all of a workforce development data. So what else do you need? Is it something you can find through All Things Missouri? Is it something that you can find through our labor education program partners at Extension? Or is it something that, maybe you need to tap into outside resources for? And then finally, we wouldn't be Extension if we didn't ask, how will you measure your impact? So as you get started in this work, is it going to be, we want to see new jobs, we want to see people in apprenticeship programs, we want to see skills mismatch, decreasing? Setting those goals are going to be really important. And so the engagement guide that we put together will hopefully help you set some of those goals. So that's the end of my presentation for now. I'm going to turn it back over to Megan, I believe, in the studio, and then I think we're going to head out to our breakout groups. So I'm excited to have been able to show you this story map. And again, you can find it on allthingsmissouri.org/workforce. Thanks so much.
And I want to thank you. Wow, what a presentation. I've been getting some text messages over here from folks telling me how impressed they are with the great work you're doing, Jamie, and Rob as well. Thank both of you. This is incredible work. One of the things I think is important for all of us to remember is All Things Missouri was created as an asset, obviously, for MU Extension, but it's really an asset for the state. And that's why it was set up the way it is. It was done that. The original intent was to bring all the data sets that anyone could ever want on All Things Missouri are there. And so if you have questions, I know you're going to have some work sessions, but please let Jamie and Rob know what it is you can do. You've heard from two of the real stars we have in Extension that really get it and understand what it means to serve Missourians and do it in this way. So Jamie, I want to thank you, and Rob again. Terrific job. If we could do applause right now, we would. Really appreciate the great work that you guys have done and what you presented today, and kudos to you and the others that have been involved in this great work as well. Like we did on broadband, we're going to put together a system workforce development team, and Allison Copeland and Ashley Rohde, a part of my team there, that we work very closely with faculty and staff and administrators across the whole system. We've been working to put together a group of people that could really focus on this, just like we did with broadband again, but spend some time deeply looking at what can we do, what are the assets of the university that we can bring forward to really impact this with our partners like Department of Economic Development, State Chamber, workforce development groups across the state, and others. Community colleges, K-12, all those partners that are so important in this work. So what I want to do now is to introduce to you those people and those individuals that are going to be a part of that because they're going to have some extra work to do to set some things up and tee some things up so that all of us can again participate in different ways that it may be important from wherever you sit within either Extension or as a partner organization. From the University of Missouri here in Columbia, I'm really glad that we're going to have Rob Russell, who you've already heard from today, as a part of that. Also Donna Garcia, looking at it from a youth perspective, who was actually, by the way, a national award winner yesterday for her work in diversity and inclusion at a national level. I'm really proud of that work. And then Steve Devlin, who is our Senior Program Director for Business and Development and Communities. I really appreciate the great work those folks are doing. And again, they're going to come at it from the MU perspective. From UMKC, we're really glad to have other partners. We're going to have Carmen DeHart, and Carmen is Senior Director of Entrepreneurial Education at UMKC Innovation Center and Regional Director for Missouri Small Business Development Center. So really looking forward to having Carmen as a part of that. And Carmen, thank you for your willingness to do that. Also, you've heard me say this name before today, Nate Addington. Nate is our Director of Engagement for the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He's going to be a part of the team. For Missouri S&T, we're really glad I have a couple colleagues there that are going to join us. Beth Kanye-Goshi, Chair and Professor of Teacher Education and Certification, which I think brings a great perspective in terms of education being a part of this conversation. And then Benjamin Kwasa, who is Assistant Professor for Engineering Management and Systems, again, looking at the technology side and what we can do to be more thoughtful and more into this area of workforce development. Lastly, from the University of Missouri St. Louis, really glad that Doug Swanson, who is our field specialist in labor and workforce development, is going to be a part of that conversation, again, located there in St. Louis. And then Teresa Ballesteri, who is the Director of Career Services for University of Missouri St. Louis. Again, great people coming together in that next step and as we think about what we're going to do in the future. We are connectors. We're partners in the community. We're doing great work. And everyone watching today can connect in different ways. The important thing is that each of us take that action we can take. It's not that we've got to do too much, but do what we can do in this space to move this thing forward, not just for ourselves, not just for those who live here today, but for that next generation of Missourians. With that, I'm going to go over to Megan.
Thanks, Marshall. In just a moment, this broadcast is going to end, and you will need to go back into your event guide to find the Zoom link for the regional session that you've signed up for. The event guide's also where you're going to find some of that background material for the workforce development sessions. With that, I'm going to just let Marshall close this out. We've really appreciated your time today. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you have productive regional sessions this morning.
As I close out our part of the program, first of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us. This has been an incredible couple days, and I want to say up front, there's been a team of people. Megan's sort of the captain of the team in communications, but there is a team of people around her and others that work around me every day that have made this possible. First time we've ever done anything like this, and I had someone say to me yesterday that they thought it was going to be another Zoom, and they said, if anything, that's not another Zoom. That's not a Zoom like I've seen thus far. Well, it's not a Zoom. It is a production. It takes a lot of talent, a lot of ability. People like me may have an idea or a dream, but it takes people to execute that, and I really appreciate all those. I wish I could name them all, and I know they've been recognized in different ways, but I want to thank all of you that have been involved in this. This is a lot to pull off, and you've done it, and I'm very grateful for that. But doing this is not enough. We have to take it to the next step. You do these things for a reason. First of all, to talk about where we've come from, but then also to pivot toward where we're going. And if we want Missouri to be all it can be, we need to take all the things we've heard today and yesterday and in the different sessions, the breakouts you've been in, and we got to move that forward. And I was thinking about how do you summarize this and how do you bring this, sort of put a period on it or an exclamation point? How do you bring it to close today? A couple thoughts came to my mind. One is that partnership helps us do together what we cannot do apart. Partnership helps us do together what we cannot do apart. I really believe in that. That's the reason you partner, is that you know by working together, you can do things that you couldn't do by yourself. Extension, University of Missouri system, all the different layers we have, we do a lot of good work. But when we work together internally and then more importantly externally, better things happen, not just for ourselves, but more importantly for Missourians. You know, I also think about another statement that I've used often in doing presentations, and that is, you could do this without me, but I can't do this without you. It does require that interdependence. When we look at data that Jamie just shared and Rob and the initiatives that he's driving, this team we've just talked about, it's going to take all of us putting our shoulder to the wheel to move this thing forward, because we care deeply not only about those of us, again, that live here today, but it's about that next generation. It is what can we do to ensure that Missouri realizes the potential that it can have. And that's what these conversations are about. And we have to get excited. We have to have that internal motivation in us every single day to say, and this is what I can do. This is how I can make it better. And if we all own that, then good things happen out of that. The last thing I will share with you, I heard Allison Copeland talk about her first job, and I heard Ted talk about what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a cowboy, and it brought to mind something in my brain that I don't share very often because it never happened. But when I was about 8 or 9, 10 years old, somewhere in that range, My dream job was to be quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. I wanted to be the quarterback. I wanted to be Roger Staubach. Now, I'm showing my age there because those of you that have been more recent in your appearance on earth, you may not know who Roger Staubach was, but of my generation, especially as a young boy, he was the guy. And he was the guy you wanted to be. But the thing that made that work, and obviously that dream didn't happen. I got a better job. I became a vice chancellor of extension engagement, but that was the dream. And I realized at about 10 or 11 years old, that's probably not going to happen. But I still followed the Cowboys for many years because they had a coach by the name of Tom Landry. And Tom Landry said these words, and I have never forgotten them. I had them as a young person. I had them in front of me a lot. And he said that leadership is the art of getting people to do what they don't want to do in order to achieve what they want to achieve. Leadership is the art of getting people to do what they don't want to do to achieve what they want to achieve. Now, he had it in the context of winning a Super Bowl, and he would go on to say that nobody wants to go to practice. Nobody wants to do all that conditioning. Nobody wants to go through that. But we all want to win the Super Bowl. Well, that's kind of how it is in this work around workforce development or anything we do to help Missourians, to serve Missourians. Sometimes we got to do what we don't want to do in order to achieve what we want to achieve, and that's what leadership. So what I'm doing today is calling all of us, self-included, to be better leaders, to step into our best self and figure out what we can do to make this state and thereby this country and thereby this world a better place. There is nothing better nor more satisfaction that we can have in our lives than to know that we did something that enabled someone else, as I saw in those videos earlier, to have that job, that career, that satisfaction, that contribution that they wanted to have in their lives. You know, that's worth. That's what people want in their lives. People want to know they contributed to something bigger than themselves. And that's what we can do through our work collectively with our partners in workforce development. So again, I want to thank you for being with us today. It is the heart of what we do in Extension. It is about improving the lives of 6 million Missourians. They are my student body, and I'm proud to serve them every day. Thank you for being with us.